Shona Craven, and Deputy Political Editor at The Sun, Ryan Sabey. So, very good morning to both of you. No surprise what the main headlines are on the front pages. The closure of Heathrow Airport yesterday. Shona, you're kicking us off with the Daily Telegraph's take. They say a colossal failure.
Yeah, I mean, unsurprisingly, they've used the words of Gavin Williamson, the former Defence Secretary, Conservative MP. But I think it's pretty uncontroversial to say this was a colossal failure. And I think that the quote they have here, which numerous papers are running, which is Willie Walsh, who runs the International Air Transport Association, saying, "How is it that critical infrastructure of national and global importance is totally dependent on a single power source without an alternative?" And the other thing that obviously is being made clear in a lot of these reports is that it's not believed that this is foul play. It's not believed that this is terrorists or foreign actors trying to disrupt things in Britain. But this brings to mind for me the CrowdStrike outage that we had last year, which again, people thought, wow, look at the scale of this technological disruption to our lives that are so dependent on technology. But that again was a mistake, an innocent mistake. And it does really make you think, if this can happen by accident, how much could the UK grind to a halt if someone tried to maliciously cause problems for us? So in some ways, it's good that this has happened in a relatively quiet time. You know, it's not come at the height of holidays for people travelling, but also it's a learning experience for how we can be less vulnerable to accidental shocks like this. I mean, I'm sure the people who are stranded don't feel it's a good thing, but if you see what I mean, that the fact that we seem to be so vulnerable means that a lot of questions are going to be asked, not just about Heathrow, not just about electricity supply, but lots of other vulnerabilities as well. Yeah,
and I think investigators are saying they're keeping an open mind, but at the moment there's absolutely no evidence so far of any foul play. You're right. And Ryan, this question of resilience is going to keep being asked, isn't it, of Heathrow and of the substation itself, I guess?
Yeah. Why is it that this airport, our main hub, the second biggest airport or busiest airport in the world, was served by this one substation? And once there was a problem there, the flights were grounded. And the point in the Telegraph makes here is that the Amsterdam Schiphol Airport and also JFK in New York has their own sort of individual separate power supply. So why can't planners think of that in this country? And you think once they have had a look at this in the round in the coming weeks and months, that has to be the next step here.
Well, yeah, and Heathrow has stressed that it does have backup power systems, including diesel generators, but they're only designed to keep kind of emergency functions going to sort of make sure that air traffic control can still function and the basics, but it's not capable of providing power for what's essentially like a small city, they say, because it's so huge.
Yeah, I should also point out, I'm a bit amused by the Telegraph opting for this picture of Ed Miliband. I mean, it's not his fault. It sort of looks like he's standing beside
colossal failure. They've kind of juxtaposed the two.
It's a bit unfair. It sort of looks like he's been standing there and he's flicked the switch and caused this. So I'm not entirely sure why he's there at all.
Well, he's Energy Secretary, so perhaps they're trying to put some of the blame onto him, I guess.
Indeed, but I feel a bit bad for him because I don't think, as we say, early stage in the investigation, but I don't think it's Ed Miliband's fault that this happened.
It's unlikely to fall at his door. However, we will no doubt hear a lot more about this, not least because the after effects are likely to go on for some days, but also the questions will remain, won't they? Ryan, take us on to the front page of the Financial Times. Their main story focuses on Heathrow, but the second story, as you might expect from the Financial Times, focuses on this big week for Rachel Reeves this week with the spring statement coming.
That's right. They're looking ahead to next Wednesday's statement in the House of Commons, where Rachel Reeves will give an outline of the sort of state of play of the public finances. And they bring
And it was supposed to be just that, wasn't it?
That's kind of all it is. I mean, lots of people have been trying to say, is she going to make any tax rises? According to Treasury people, there is going to be no sort of tax rises or anything of that sort. It's just going to be looking at where the government has to kind of balance its books. And the Financial Times makes the point that she is lining up about £10 billion worth of savings, £5 billion of that from those welfare cuts that we saw this week, and then another £5 billion looking at Whitehall spending. And also, one of the first things that she's actually going to say when she comes to that dispatch box, as the piece here makes out, is that the world is changing. So you just wonder whether that's teeing up something for later in the year at the proper budget, where she will actually make some tax rises. But one thing on the horizon as well is that tariff war and that Liberation Day that Donald Trump is calling it, when all those tariffs come in. And Rachel Reeves will make the point as well that Donald Trump has a good relationship with Keir Starmer, so it's likely that we could avoid the main part of the tariff war. But as she says, it's an uncertain world.
Well, yes, and in fact, Rachel Reeves and her shadow, Mel Stride, are both going to be on Trevor Phillips' show tomorrow. So obviously getting ahead of that statement and be interesting to see what the message to the media is ahead of the statement this week. But it's going to be a tough week for her, isn't it? She's already under a huge amount of pressure and she's not necessarily going to be able to say anything terribly positive this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a sign of the times that the most positive thing that she has to say is that Keir Starmer has perhaps played the situation with Donald Trump successfully so far to avoid these tariffs. But I think people will feel very vulnerable that the UK's economic future is so much in the hands of someone so unpredictable. And of course, just after Starmer's visit, we saw everything that unfolded regarding Trump and Zelensky. So it's not going to be a positive message. We're also going to hear about the impact assessment into those welfare cuts, and it's not going to be good. There's no positive to really be gleaned from that.
Well, that's right. And a lot of Labour backbenchers uncomfortable with some of the cuts that she's chosen to make so far.
Yeah, just in the last few weeks, you've had the welfare cuts that have obviously been pretty upset about, and also you had the foreign aid cut just a few weeks ago. But all of this is in the backdrop of the sort of economic despair, really. All the economic forecasts for Britain for the next couple of years has all been downgraded. So we had the OECD this week. We expect the OBR to downgrade Britain's growth from 2% to around 1%. So it's a grim picture for Rachel Reeves, and she's going to have to pick up the pieces and try and spell out how she's going to balance the books.
Especially when a lot of her plans had rested on strong growth. So let's see what she has to say later in the week. Shona, take us to a story in The Times which has a shocking headline.
Yeah, so the headline is half of sex offences in primary schools carried out by children, but the top line is that allegations of sexual violence have been made by children in almost 1,700 primary schools. And the line about the proportion is that in the past it was a third of those reported involved children themselves, whereas previously the offenders, half now are children, whereas previously it was a third. So it's talking about not just the scale of this, but who the perpetrators are, and the idea that of the perpetrators of things like groping, inappropriate touching, but also name-calling and harassment, that this is the children themselves who are perpetuating this against other children. I think that given the huge conversation that started about adolescence, the Netflix series part of that national conversation, but I have to say the details of this...
Because of the influences, is that what you mean?
Well, partly. I mean, certainly The Times has a spread about the influence of phones, headed if just one kid in the class has a phone, they all have access to a world of porn, and obviously drawing links between not just access to pornography, access to influencers as well. But I have to say that although people are talking about, oh, we need to have this conversation off the back of this show, it doesn't make for pleasant reading at all. The details of it are really, really, really unpleasant.
Yeah, really grim stuff. Take us, well, I was going to say to another world. It's not really that. It's about the astronauts coming back to this world and what impact it will have had on them. Their longer sojourn in space.
Yeah, absolutely. The story of Butch Wilmore and Cindy Williams, who spent best part of 300 days, 286 days in space on the International Space Station. Obviously, they didn't expect to be there as long, but the sort of effects on the body of what being out there for, you actually reduce in size. You actually come back a few inches smaller. And they've actually, in this piece in The Times, they've actually spoken to an astronaut who's been up there. And you actually have to do so much exercise and take vitamin D tablets when you're there. So.
Yeah, they'll be going through lots of health checks now they're back, won't they? Good to see you both for now. You're not allowed to leave the building, though, because you'll be back in the next hour for another selection. But for the moment, thanks both very much indeed. We're going to check on the weather quickly now.